The frozen morning air of December 19th, 1944 carried sounds that German Unteroffizier Klaus Wendel had learned to dread. Somewhere beyond the tree line outside Neuville, Belgium, engines were running, but these weren't the familiar sounds of German or Allied armour he'd grown accustomed to over years of war. His gloved hands, numb from the cold, gripped a pencil as he tried to write in his personal notebook inside the cramped confines of his Panther tank's turret. The words came slowly in the darkness before dawn, describing something his training had never prepared him for. The Americans possessed a new kind of hunter, he wrote, one that appeared and vanished like a phantom. By the time German gun crews could rotate their turrets to engage, these mysterious machines had already disappeared. Yesterday alone, 3 Tigers had been destroyed by this unseen enemy. Through the commander's cupola, Wendell stared into the blackness of the Ardennes forest, unaware that elements of the American 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion were already positioning their M18 Hellcats for the coming engagement. What Klaus Wendel couldn't possibly know as he peered into that frozen darkness was that in precisely 17 minutes, every principle of tank warfare that the Wehrmacht had perfected since 1939 would become obsolete before his eyes. The Panther he commanded represented everything German engineering had achieved in armoured combat. Its 75mm gun could punch through any American tank at 2,000 metres. The frontal armour could deflect most shells the Allies could throw at it. This vehicle embodied careful German planning, methodical design, overwhelming firepower married to substantial protection. Yet within just 3 minutes of first contact that morning, Wendell would watch multiple German tanks burn, destroyed by American vehicles moving at velocities that German armour couldn't achieve even on paved highways. The Battle of the Bulge had entered its 4th day, and across the snow-covered forests stretching through Belgium and Luxembourg, German tank commanders were confronting a horrifying new reality. The Americans had created something that hunted in ways no armoured vehicle in history had hunted before. These machines weren't stronger or more heavily protected than German tanks. They were simply faster than anything German crews believed could survive on a modern battlefield. The story of the M18 Hellcat began 3 years earlier in December 1941, just as America entered the war that had been consuming Europe. While German tank doctrine evolved from principles of overwhelming firepower and protection, a philosophy that led to 45-ton Panthers and almost 70-ton King Tigers, American designers at General Motors pursued a radically different approach that would terrify German crews when they finally encountered it in combat. The tank destroyer force came into existence under General Leslie McNair's directive on November 21, 1941, operating on principles documented in Field Manual FM 18-5. The core concept was elegantly simple: seek out enemy armour, strike decisively, and destroy it. Speed and firepower mattered more than armour protection. The M18, which bore the development designation T-70, would embody this philosophy to such an extreme that German tank designers would have considered it suicidal. The Buick Motor Division facility in Flint, Michigan, sometimes confused with the nearby Sherman tank plant at Grand Blanc, received the contract in January 1942. Chief Engineer Joseph Roberts faced specifications that appeared contradictory to the point of impossibility. The vehicle needed to mount a 76mm high-velocity gun capable of destroying any German tank in existence. It required a low profile for effective concealment. It had to achieve speeds exceeding 50 miles per hour. All of this while keeping total weight under 20 tons. Roberts' solution defied every conventional principle of tank design that had guided armoured vehicle development since the First World War. The M18's armour measured a mere 25.4mm at its thickest point on the turret front, with just 12.7mm protecting the hull front. This was barely enough to stop heavy machine gun fire. A German 88mm shell wouldn't just penetrate this thin skin, it would pass completely through both sides of the vehicle. The design prioritized mobility above everything else, creating what military historians would later describe as the fastest tracked armored fighting vehicle of the entire Second World War. The first M18 Hellcats reached Europe in early 1944, initially seeing action in Italy with the 894th Tank Destroyer Battalion. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion became the first unit in the European theatre to receive these vehicles in May 1944, landing at Utah Beach on July 13th. However, it was during the breakout from Normandy where German tank crews first encountered what would haunt their nightmares for the remainder of the war. Near Coutances, France, on July 29, 1944, elements of German heavy tank battalions filed disturbing engagement reports describing American tank destroyers that vanished before German gunners could return fire. After-action reports documented enemy vehicles exhibiting speeds estimated at 80 km per hour over rough terrain, with total engagement times from first shot to last sighting of approximately 180 seconds. The mathematics were brutally simple and absolutely terrifying for German crews. A Panther tank's turret required a full 60 seconds to complete one full rotation. Its maximum speed topped out at 34 miles per hour on roads, dropping to just 15 miles per hour across country. The M18 Hellcat could accelerate from a standstill to 30 miles per hour in 7 seconds. It could maintain 55 miles per hour on roads with the governor engaged, 60 without it, and sustain 26 miles per hour cross-country through terrain that would slow German tanks to a crawl. During the 3 minutes, it took a German crew to identify the threat, rotate their turret, acquire the target and fire. The Hellcat could displace nearly a mile and a half from its original firing position. The fear German crews experienced wasn't irrational or the product of combat stress. The M18's 76mm M1A2 gun couldn't penetrate Panther frontal armor with standard M62 AAP-CBC ammunition, this was true. But it could easily defeat the 40mm side armor at 1,500 meters. With the scarce M93 HVAP tungsten core rounds, though crews typically received only 1 or 2 rounds monthly, penetration reached 157mm at 500 yards. The gun's muzzle velocity of 2,600 feet per second meant the shell arrived at the target before the sound of the shot itself. German doctrine emphasized methodical engagement protocols, careful target acquisition, deliberate aiming, conservation of ammunition. Crews drilled extensively on fighting from static positions, using terrain for hull-down placement where only the turret was exposed. The Panther and Tiger were designed specifically for this doctrine, heavily armoured, mounting powerful guns, advancing slowly but steadily. The Hellcat shattered every single aspect of this training. M18 crews trained at Camp Hood, Texas, a facility established specifically as the Tank Destroyer Tactical and Firing Center on 158,706 acres, learned to never remain stationary for more than 30 seconds after firing. The motto "Speed is life" became standard doctrine drilled into every crew. Where German doctrine emphasized the single decisive shot, American tank destroyer doctrine preached shoot and scoot. Between July 1943 and October 1944, Buick's Flint, Michigan plant produced exactly 2,507 M18 Hellcats, far fewer than the originally planned 8,986 vehicles. Production included 6 pilot models, an initial contract for 1,000 vehicles, and a final order of 1,507 units. Peak monthly production reached 267 units in November 1943. This production rate, while modest compared to Sherman tank output, still exceeded German Panther production capacity. While Germany struggled to produce 90 Panthers monthly by late 1944, American factories had already completed the entire Hellcat production run and moved on to other projects. The disparity meant that while German crews knew each lost Panther or Tiger was essentially irreplaceable, American forces could rapidly replace any losses and still maintain unit strength. The M18 featured a Wright R975 radial engine, originally designed for aircraft applications. Early production vehicles, serial numbers 1 through 1350, used the naturally aspirated R975C1, producing 350 horsepower. Later models, serial 1351 through 2507, received the supercharged R975C4, generating 400 horsepower, beginning in March 1944. This power, combined with the vehicle's 17.7 to 20-ton weight, sources vary based on configuration and equipment load, created an exceptional power-to-weight ratio of 20 to 22.5 horsepower per ton, compared to the Panthers' 15 horsepower per ton. The Hellcats' hydromatic automatic transmission with torque converter allowed drivers to maintain maximum speed while maneuvering, a critical advantage over German tanks that required manual shifting and clutch operation during combat. The ground pressure of just 10.5 pounds per square inch, less than many wheeled vehicles, meant Hellcats could traverse mud and snow that immobilized 57-ton Tiger Fun tanks with their 15.2 psi ground pressure and 69.8-ton Tiger IIs. The breakout from Normandy in August 1944 provided the first large-scale demonstration of Hellcat doctrine in action. During Operation Cobra, beginning July 28, 1944, the 603rd Tank Destroyer Battalion, which had received M18s in October 1943 and landed at Utah Beach between July 21st and 22nd, participated in the sweep through Brittany. The 704th and 705th Battalions, also equipped with M18, joined the rapid advance eastward. Traditional tank warfare doctrine would have dictated careful covered approaches and sustained firefights. Instead, M18 crews executed what became known as rapid flanking attacks, using their superior speed to strike from unexpected directions before German turrets could traverse to meet the threat. The Battle of Aracourt, fought September 18th through 29th, 1944, not October as sometimes misreported, near the Nancy bridgehead across the Moselle River, demonstrated the M18's full potential when properly employed according to tank destroyer doctrine. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, attached to the 4th Armoured Division's Combat Command A, faced elements of the German 113th Panzer Brigade in conditions that should have favoured the defenders. On September 19th through 29th, Lieutenant Edwin Leiper's platoon engaged German armour in heavy fog at extremely close range, with visibility limited to just 30 feet. In the first 5 minutes of contact, his M18S destroyed 5 German tanks while losing just 1 vehicle. The engagement continued with 10 additional enemy tanks destroyed for the loss of 2 more M18. Captain Tom Evans earned the Distinguished Service Cross after personally manning a disabled M18's gun to destroy enemy panzers threatening his position. The overall results at Aracourt were staggering by any measure. 39 German tanks destroyed for 4 M18 tanks destroyed and 3 damaged, producing a kill ratio of 5.6 to 1 that validated the entire tank destroyer concept. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 became the Hellcats' most legendary proving ground and the stuff of tank destroyer legend. The 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion, described by General A.D. Bruce as the finest tank destroyer battalion yet trained, rushed to defend Bastogne, providing critical armoured support for the surrounded 101st Airborne Division. The 705th arrived with approximately 41 M18s while ultimately destroying 14 enemy tanks in total during initial engagements. Under Lieutenant Colonel Clifford D. Templeton, the 705th reinforced the Bastogne perimeter late on December 19th with approximately 12 M18 operational. The combined force helped destroy at least 30 German tanks over the next 2 days, inflicting between 600 to 1,000 German casualties while achieving a crucial 48-hour delay that allowed American forces to organize a coherent defense. The 705th would later receive a Presidential Unit Citation for actions at Bastogne from December 18th through 27th, 1944. On Christmas Day, 1944 alone, the 705th destroyed 27 German tanks while losing 6 M18s engaging the 15th Panzergrenadier Division, maintaining their exceptional kill ratios even in the most desperate fighting of the entire campaign. Overall, during the siege of Bastogne, the 705th destroyed approximately 40 German tanks for 6 M18 losses, achieving a kill ratio of 6.7 to 1. The Hellcats' advantages actually increased in adverse conditions that degraded German tank performance. While German heavy tanks struggled in mud and snow, the M18's lightweight construction and low ground pressure allowed maintained mobility when heavier vehicles bogged down. During the Bulge's opening phase, heavy fog grounded air support and limited visibility to under 100 meters. German doctrine relied heavily on long-range gunnery superiority, now completely negated by weather conditions. Hellcat crews, trained for close-range ambush tactics at Camp Hood's revolutionary battle conditioning course, thrived in these exact conditions. The M18's lightweight provided strategic mobility that German heavy tanks simply couldn't match regardless of crew skill or tactical prowess. While a King Tiger required Class 70 bridges, which were extremely rare in Europe, the M18 could cross Class 24 bridges, basically any structure that could support a loaded truck. This advantage proved decisive during Rhine crossings. While German heavy tanks searched desperately for intact bridges strong enough to support their massive weight, Hellcats crossed on temporary structures erected by combat engineers in just hours. While American factories built 2,507 M18 Hellcats between July 1943 and October 1944, Germany struggled throughout the entire war to produce heavy tanks in meaningful numbers. Total Panther production reached approximately 6,000 vehicles over the war's duration. Only 492 King Tigers and 1,347 Tiger Rum tanks were ever built, despite massive resource allocation. The mathematics of industrial capacity were absolutely inescapable. For every Panther Germany produced, America built 8 tank destroyers and tanks combined. German tank crews faced not just superior tactics, but utterly overwhelming numbers. American production included 49,234 M4 Shermans, 2,507 M18 Hellcats, 2,324 M10 tank destroyers, 2,073 M36 tank destroyers, plus 88,410 other armoured vehicles of various types. German tank crew training in 1944 emphasised methodical engagement procedures. Careful target acquisition, deliberate aiming, strict conservation of ammunition. By late 1944, veteran German tank crews who had survived years of combat were increasingly rare. Replacement crews received minimal training, sometimes just 2 weeks of basic instruction before facing actual combat against experienced Allied forces. American Hellcat crews conversely received extensive standardized training at Camp Hood, later redesignated Fort Hood, Texas. The Tank Destroyer School's program included 17 weeks of intensive training with heavy emphasis on speed, mobility, and individual initiative. The facility, commanded initially by Lieutenant Colonel and later Brigadier General Andrew D. Bruce, could train 100,000 soldiers simultaneously with 28 battalions and 8 groups in various stages of preparation at any given time. Crews practiced high-speed firing drills, rapid displacement maneuvers, and coordinated attacks until these complex procedures became instinctive muscle memory. The Revolutionary Battle Conditioning Course, originally called the Tank Hunting Course, became the first U.S. Army training program to employ live fire overhead while trainees maneuvered, with soldiers spending a full week in simulated combat conditions that closely approximated actual battlefield stress. By late 1944, American tank destroyer doctrine had evolved substantially from initial theoretical concepts to proven combat techniques refined by actual battlefield experience. FM 18-5, published in June 1942, stated clearly that there is but one battle objective of tank destroyer units: the destruction of hostile tanks. General Bruce later clarified in detailed guidance that seek meant vigorous reconnaissance and intelligence gathering, Strike meant destruction through accurate gunfire rather than charging enemy positions, and destroy meant complete elimination of enemy armor as an effective combat force. Combat experience in North Africa and Italy modified these original concepts significantly. North African battles taught brutal lessons that pure offensive charges against prepared positions were suicidal regardless of vehicle speed. Instead, aggressive fighting spirit combined with stealth and tactical deception became the cornerstone of successful tank-destroyer employment. M18 crews developed wolfpack tactics where 3 or 4 Hellcats operated in coordinated but independent attacks, communicating constantly by radio to create overlapping fields of fire while maintaining constant movement that prevented German crews from fixing their positions. By war's end, in May 1945, M18 Hellcat units had achieved remarkable combat statistics that validated the entire tank-destroyer concept despite initial skepticism from traditional armor advocates. The Army Historical Foundation documents 526 total enemy armored vehicle kills, broken down as 498 in the European theatre, 17 in Italy and 11 in the Pacific theatre. With approximately 216 M18s lost to enemy fire in the European theatre specifically, this produced an overall kill-to-loss ratio of 2.4 to 1, or 2.3 to 1 in Europe specifically, the highest ratio achieved by any American tank or tank destroyer throughout World War II. Individual unit achievements often exceeded these already impressive averages substantially. The 603rd Tank Destroyer Battalion destroyed upwards of 90 enemy armoured fighting vehicles during its combat service. The 704th achieved similar numbers, with their Aracourt engagement alone accounting for 39 confirmed kills. The 705th's performance at Bastogne, 40 tanks destroyed for 6 lost, demonstrated sustained excellence under the most challenging possible conditions. The 601st Tank Destroyer Battalion achieved the highest documented ratio at nearly 23 to 1, though with smaller total engagement numbers. Loss analysis revealed that between 40 to 50% of M18 casualties resulted from enemy tanks and anti-tank guns exploiting the vehicle's minimal armor protection, while 25 to 35% stemmed from mechanical breakdowns in the field. Remaining losses came from infantry anti-tank weapons, including Panzerfausts, artillery fire and mines. The fundamental difference between German and American armoured vehicle design philosophy becomes crystal clear when directly comparing specifications side by side. The Panther weighed exactly 44.8 to 45 tons, with 80mm frontal armour sloped at 55 degrees, providing effective protection equivalent to approximately 140mm of vertical armour. The Tiger I weighed 57 tons with 100mm vertical frontal armour. The King Tiger reached 69.8 tons with 150mm sloped frontal armour and 180mm turret armour. Against these heavily protected vehicles, the M18 Hellcat weighed just 17.7 to 20 tons, with armour ranging from 12.7mm on the hull to 25.4mm on the turret front, thinner than some German armoured cars designed for reconnaissance roles. Yet this apparent vulnerability enabled the speed that became its primary defensive characteristic. At 500 metres distance, a Hellcat moving perpendicular to a Tiger's gun at 40 miles per hour would cross the Tiger's gun arc in just 4.5 seconds, faster than the gunner could manually track the target after hydraulic traverse failure, a common combat occurrence as these complex systems degraded. Beyond raw speed, the M18 demonstrated superior mechanical reliability compared to German heavy tanks throughout sustained combat operations. The Wright R975 radial engine, derived directly from proven aircraft designs, started reliably even in sub-zero winter conditions that plagued German vehicles. German tank crews using diesel engines that required careful warm-up procedures couldn't understand how Hellcats could start instantly and accelerate immediately to combat speed. The Panther's sophisticated transmission, while technically advanced and theoretically superior, proved fragile under actual combat conditions. Final drive failures plagued the Panther design throughout its entire service life, leaving otherwise functional tanks immobilized. The Tiger II's mechanical complexity meant that more King Tigers were ultimately lost to mechanical failure and abandonment than to actual enemy action. Meanwhile, the M18's deliberately simplified design, using proven automotive components wherever possible instead of custom-engineered parts, ensured consistently high operational readiness rates that kept vehicles in the field. American logistical superiority amplified the M18's combat effectiveness far beyond what raw specifications would suggest. While German tanks often sat idle for extended periods for lack of fuel, spare parts or ammunition, Hellcat units maintained high operational rates through brutally efficient supply chains. The famous Red Ball Express and similar dedicated logistics operations ensured consistent fuel deliveries even during rapid advances. Standardized parts meant easy field maintenance using common tools and readily available components. German forces by late 1944 faced chronic fuel shortages that severely limited operations. Operation Watch on the Rhine, the German code name for the Ardennes offensive, partially aimed to capture Allied fuel dumps because German strategic fuel supplies couldn't sustain prolonged offensive operations. This critical fuel situation meant German tanks often fought defensively from static positions by necessity, exactly the scenario where the mobile Hellcat held maximum tactical advantage. Every single M18 carried both radio and intercom systems that worked reliably in combat conditions. SCR 508 or SCR 528 radio sets provided consistent communication between vehicles and with higher command. German tanks, especially by late 1944 as the Third Reich's industrial capacity collapsed, often operated with degraded or completely non-functional communications equipment, forcing reliance on signal flags or pre-planned maneuvers that couldn't adapt to changing tactical situations. This seemingly minor technical detail had major tactical implications on actual battlefields. Hellcat platoons could coordinate attacks in real time through continuous radio communication, adjusting instantly to German responses and exploiting any opening. When 4 Hellcats attacked from different directions simultaneously, they operated as a single coordinated organism through radio coordination. German tanks, often fighting in communication isolation with minimal contact between vehicles, couldn't possibly match this tactical flexibility. Before the Hellcats' legendary performance in Northwest Europe captured headlines and military attention, the Italian campaign provided German forces with their first clear warnings about this new American weapon. In May 1944, during the breakout from Anzio, the 894th Tank Destroyer Battalion's Hellcats faced elements of the Hermann Göring Panzer Division in sustained combat. The terrain consisting of rolling hills covered with vineyards and stone walls should theoretically have neutralized the M18's speed advantage by limiting maneuver room. Instead, it amplified their psychological impact on German morale. The Hellcats used their ability to accelerate up 30-degree slopes at speeds German tanks couldn't achieve on flat ground, creating an illusion of omnipresence by appearing at multiple points along ridgelines in rapid succession, making German commanders believe they faced far more vehicles than were actually present. This early demonstration of Hellcat capabilities went largely unheeded by German high command, who remained focused almost exclusively on the Eastern Front, where the vast majority of German armour was committed against Soviet forces. Winter 1944-45 proved conclusively that the Hellcats' advantages actually increased rather than decreased in adverse weather conditions. The M18's wide tracks and lightweight construction, producing just 10.5 psy ground pressure, allowed effective movement through snow that trapped heavier vehicles completely. German Tigers and Panthers, already struggling with mechanical reliability issues, found their mobility further reduced by winter conditions in the Ardennes. During the Battle of the Bulge, Hellcat crews exploited these conditions with expert skill. They used their superior mobility to race through areas where German heavy tanks bogged down helplessly, appearing behind German lines in locations where heavy armor was thought physically impossible to deploy. This mobility advantage in poor weather conditions contributed significantly to the successful defense of Bastogne and the eventual failure of the entire German offensive. German forces attempted various counter-tactics against the growing Hellcat threat, as combat reports documented increasing losses to these fast tank destroyers. Updated tactical manuals recommended immediate smoke deployment when M18s were positively identified, essentially blinding German forces temporarily in hopes the threat would pass or lose tracking. Other desperate measures included welding additional track links to side armor for added protection, though this proved completely ineffective against 76mm rounds, and creating deliberate ambushes with hidden anti-tank guns positioned to catch Hellcats during their high-speed approaches. Nothing worked consistently enough to counter the Hellcat threat effectively. The combination of extreme speed, adequate firepower, and tactical flexibility proved insurmountable with available German resources and tactical doctrine. The vehicle's very presence in a combat sector altered German tactical behavior significantly. Commanders became increasingly reluctant to commit armor without extensive preliminary reconnaissance, sacrificing operational initiative and momentum. In March 1945, near Remagen, M18s from the 656th Tank Destroyer Battalion crossed the captured Ludendorff Bridge while it was too structurally damaged for heavier vehicles to risk crossing. They rapidly established a defensive screen on the east bank that destroyed 11 German tanks attempting to approach the bridge, including 2 King Tigers that couldn't maneuver quickly enough in the confined terrain along the Rhine Valley. This action demonstrated the strategic value of the M18's lightweight design in ways beyond simple tactical mobility. While German heavy tanks required specific routes and specially reinforced bridges capable of supporting their massive weight, Hellcats could use virtually any crossing that supported standard truck traffic, appearing in supposedly impossible locations deep behind German lines. April 1945 saw the Ruhr Pocket become a massive trap for German Army Group B as Allied forces closed from multiple directions. The 893rd Tank Destroyer Battalion's Hellcats conducted what historians consider exemplary tank destroyer operations, racing through collapsing German lines at speeds approaching 60 miles per hour on cleared Autobahn sections, appearing deep in German rear areas before commanders even knew the front line had been penetrated. These final operations of the European war demonstrated the M18 concept brought to full tactical maturity. Speed employed as a primary weapon, mobility functioning as effective armor, surprise as the primary tactical advantage. German defensive positions carefully designed and prepared to stop deliberate attacks by heavy tanks proved completely useless against vehicles that simply raced around strongpoints at highway speeds. Post-war analysis conducted by US Army historians validated the M18 concept despite its obvious limitations and initial controversy. The 76mm gun's documented inability to penetrate Panther or Tiger frontal armor with standard ammunition forced absolute reliance on flanking attacks, missions where the vehicle's speed became not just useful but absolutely essential for survival. With standard M62 APCBC rounds achieving only 93mm of penetration at 500 yards and the scarce HVAP rounds carefully rationed, crews had to close to suicidal ranges for any frontal engagement against German heavy tanks. Yet the final combat record speaks definitively. 526 confirmed kills against 216 combat losses produced the highest kill-to-loss ratio of any American armored vehicle throughout World War II. This success came not from superior firepower or protection, but from revolutionary employment of speed and mobility combined with superior crew training and tactical doctrine. The M18 Hellcat represented far more than just another armoured vehicle in the Allied arsenal. It embodied a completely different fundamental conception of armoured warfare itself. While Germany perfected the tank as breakthrough weapon and mobile fortress, concentrating on firepower and protection, America created something genuinely new in military history: The tank destroyer as pure hunter, designed specifically to seek and destroy enemy armor rather than support infantry or break through fortified positions. The tank destroyer force's guiding motto, "Seek, strike and destroy," proved remarkably prophetic. By war's end, American tank destroyer battalions collectively claimed over 11,000 enemy vehicles destroyed in total across all theaters, with Hellcat-equipped units achieving the highest kill ratios. The doctrine emphasized repeatedly that tank destroyers were fundamentally not tanks and shouldn't fight like tanks. They were hunters that struck from ambush and vanished immediately, never standing to fight toe-to-toe. Beyond purely tactical success, the Hellcat achieved significant strategic effects that influenced German operational planning. German armoured reserves, instead of concentrating for offensive operations as doctrine prescribed, were increasingly held back defensively to guard against possible tank destroyer raids. The mere confirmed presence of Hellcat units in a particular sector could freeze German armoured movement for hours, while commanders sought verification of their exact locations and strength. During the Ardennes offensive, intercepted German radio communications revealed commanders repeatedly requesting specific verification that no Hellcat units were present in their operational areas before committing precious armoured reserves. Hours were lost to reconnaissance efforts, offensive momentum sacrificed to tactical caution driven by fear of these fast tank destroyers. The offensive that was supposed to split Allied forces and potentially change the war's outcome was partially paralysed by fear of vehicles weighing less than half what a Panther weighed. The 2,507 Hellcats built represented fundamental American industrial philosophy perfectly. Not perfection through meticulous engineering, but practical efficiency through mass production using proven components. While Germany built 6,000 Panthers over 3 full years of production, struggling constantly with quality control and component shortages, Buick produced all M18 Hellcats in just 15 months, using proven components and deliberately simplified construction methods. German engineers, when examining captured M18s for technical intelligence purposes, noted the apparent crude construction quality. Functional welds rather than perfect joints meeting exacting standards, armor plates showing visible tool marks, interior ergonomics that seemed almost accidental rather than carefully planned. Yet this supposedly crude vehicle consistently destroyed German tanks built with watchmaker precision and meticulous attention to engineering detail. The critical difference lay in fundamental design philosophy and production priorities. Germany built what amounted to engineering monuments showcasing technical excellence, while America built practical battlefield tools designed for mass production. Behind all the impressive statistics and combat records lay genuine human tragedy affecting both sides. Young German tankers, many still teenagers by 1945, as the Reich scraped the bottom of its manpower barrel, faced an enemy that negated everything they'd been carefully taught during truncated training. Their meticulously maintained Panthers and Tigers, representing the absolute peak of German engineering achievement, burned just as readily when struck by Hellcat rounds fired from ambush positions. American crews, while suffering far fewer proportional losses, carried their own psychological burdens. The speed that saved their lives also meant striking without warning, often giving German crews virtually no opportunity to escape burning vehicles. The minimal armour meant that when M18s were hit, catastrophic losses often resulted with the entire crew killed instantly, though the open-topped turret design actually improved crew survival rates to over 80% compared to just 35% for German heavy tank crews trapped in sealed turrets. The M18 Hellcats' influence extended well beyond World War II's conclusion, shaping post-war armoured doctrine development. Post-war armies worldwide studied its employment, learning valuable lessons that mobility could trump protection under certain tactical circumstances. Modern military doctrine's heavy emphasis on shoot and scoot tactics, rapid displacement after firing, and mobility as primary survival technique, all trace direct intellectual routes back to M18 employment during 1944 to 45. Today at Fort Moore, formerly Fort Benning, a carefully restored M18 Hellcat stands prominently at the Armour School entrance. Its commemorative plaque honours the vehicle as the fastest armoured fighting vehicle of World War II and living proof that American ingenuity and industrial mass production could defeat sophisticated enemy tanks through speed and tactical innovation rather than matching them in armour protection. The final comprehensive accounting of the Hellcat's historical impact tells a remarkable story. Production totaled exactly 2,507 vehicles manufactured. The production period spanned just 15 months from July 1943 through October 1944. Peak production reached 267 units during November 1943. Unit cost was $57,500 in 1943 currency values. Production location was Buick Division's facility in Flint, Michigan. Performance specifications included maximum speed of 55 miles per hour, with governor engaged, 60 miles per hour ungoverned. Acceleration from standstill to 30 miles per hour took 7 seconds. Operating range reached 100 to 105 miles, depending on terrain. Power-to-weight ratio achieved 20 to 22.5 horsepower per ton. Ground pressure measured just 10.5 pounds per square inch. The combat record showed enemy vehicles destroyed, totaling 526 confirmed kills. M18s lost to enemy fire numbered 216 vehicles. Overall kill ratio reached 2.4 to 1. European theatre ratio specifically was 2.3 to 1. Comparative German tank specifications revealed the stark differences in design philosophy. The Panther weighed 44.8 to 45 tons with 15 horsepower per ton and 34 miles per hour maximum speed. Tiger I weighed 57 tons with 100 mm frontal armour and total production of 1,347 vehicles. Tiger II reached 69.8 tons with 150 mm frontal armour and only 492 produced. The supreme irony running through the entire Hellcat story is that German doctrinal choices created the exact conditions for its devastating success. By building increasingly heavy tanks, Panthers evolving to Tigers evolving to King Tigers, Germany created slow road-bound targets absolutely perfect for Hellcat hit-and-run tactics. Had Germany continued developing lighter, more mobile tanks instead of pursuing ever heavier designs, the Hellcat's fundamental advantages would have been largely minimized or negated entirely. Every ton added to German tank designs made them progressively more vulnerable to American tank destroyer tactics. The pursuit of supposedly invulnerable supertanks created vehicles that couldn't effectively respond to high-speed mobile warfare. In building armoured fortresses, Germany became vulnerable to enemies that fought like cavalry, racing around strongpoints with guns that struck and vanished before any effective retaliation was possible. The M18 Hellcat proved decisively that military victory doesn't necessarily require the absolute best equipment. It requires the right equipment properly employed according to sound tactical doctrine. German crews in their magnificent Panthers and Tigers, mechanical marvels representing years of careful engineering development, were consistently defeated by American crews in vehicles that seemed impossibly vulnerable by traditional standards. It remains one of history's clearest examples of doctrine and training defeating superior technology. Military historian Stephen J. Zaloga characterized the M18 as poorly balanced in his technical assessments, while acknowledging that its combat success was attributable primarily to the intensive training and dedication of its crews, rather than to what he considered an ill-conceived design. Yet this professional assessment arguably misses a crucial historical point. The poor balance favouring extreme speed over armour protection was precisely what enabled the revolutionary tactics that produced the highest kill-to-loss ratio of any American armoured vehicle throughout the entire Second World War. For German tank crews facing combat in 1944 to 45, 3 minutes represented their entire tactical window. 3 minutes from the first sound of high-revving American engines approaching to the impact of 76mm rounds. 3 minutes to identify the threat location, traverse their turret into position, acquire the fast-moving target and fire accurately, all while the Hellcat was already racing toward its next firing position at 55 miles per hour. 3 minutes that usually ended with their tank burning fiercely and the Hellcat already vanishing into the distance seeking its next victim. The Hellcat proved conclusively that in modern mechanized warfare, speed doesn't just kill effectively, it renders brute strength tactically irrelevant. The German tank crews who survived those desperate 3-minute engagements learned a painful lesson that would fundamentally reshape armoured warfare doctrine for decades to come. Sometimes the best armour isn't thick steel plate, but simply not being where the enemy can shoot you. Sometimes the most powerful gun isn't the largest caliber, but the one that fires accurately from where the enemy doesn't expect. Sometimes the greatest victory comes not from building the strongest possible tank, but from building exactly the right tank for the specific war you're actually fighting rather than the war you prepared for. In those 3 desperate minutes lay the fundamental difference between old thinking and new approaches, between fighting the last war and adapting to the current one, between pursuing engineering perfection and accepting battlefield pragmatism. The M18 Hellcat, consistently under-armoured compared to enemy tanks, outgunned in direct comparison to German heavy tanks, dismissed by some contemporary critics as poorly designed, achieved what German supertanks ultimately could not achieve: genuine battlefield dominance through speed, intensive crew training, and revolutionary tactical employment. For German tank crews facing M18 Hellcats across frozen Belgian forests and muddy French fields, 3 minutes was an entire lifetime compressed into desperate action. For most of them, it was all the lifetime they had remaining.